see how many people.
You can see the.
Okay, well, it is Monday, September 25th. It is currently 8:32 a.m. and I will call this City of Lacey Lodging Tax Advisory Committee meeting to order. First item on our agenda is roll call, and we will start over here.
Andrew Shedd with the Cathedral Hotel Lacey.
Chad Carpenter, Washington Center for the Performing Arts.
Ruth Weigelt, Lacey Spring Fun Fair.
Shannon Kelly Fong, Assistant City Manager for the City of Lacey.
Sadie Siglin, Management Analyst for the City Manager in the City of Lacey.
And we also have Troy Wu, our Finance Director, and I am Malcolm Miller, Deputy Mayor, City of Lacey. Next item on our agenda is an approval of the agenda from our meeting minutes and our consent items. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is public comment. Is there anybody online wishing to address this committee, as there is no one in the chamber?
I do not show anybody attending online.
Awesome. Okay, so next on our agenda, we will jump right into our 2024 lodging tax funding discussions and recommendations. Sadie, please.
Right. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, everybody who submitted a, let me share screen, a budget tool for us this year. Today, we're here to just kind of review all of the information that we have had at our previous meetings, all of your recommendations about the applications, and kind of go over how the committee would like to proceed with funding all of the applications we received this year. So with that, I will give it to Shannon.
Well, good morning. It's a nice Monday morning. Like Sadie mentioned earlier, it seems like it has gone from summer to winter right overnight. So I appreciate you all joining us here today. So we are going to go over the results of the budget tool, and then the idea is that just kind of based off of that conversation, having a conversation with the committee for kind of final recommendations to the City Council for LTAC funding in 2024. So just to give you a kind of a high level overview, we did receive 3 of the filled out budget tools, and there were some immediate takeaways that we saw looking at some of the results. And the first one was that funding allocations varied. So across everyone who filled it out, there was a variation, and that certainly makes a lot of sense. And one thing we found as one of the major kind of variations was there was some people who unfunded some requests, and then other people who spread out funding across all of the requests. So that was one of the big takeaways that we saw. We also saw the use of the additional $50,000 varied. So 2 out of the 3 added the additional $50,000, and 1 did not. Across all of the applications, we saw that sports leagues were prioritized and that marketing allocations were less than the previous year. So just to kind of walk through really quickly. So what this table is showing you, and I've got a copy and it's a little bit more detailed than what's showing up here on the screen, and I'll pass this out, is this is showing the breakdown from committee members and their budget tools and where they provided funding to. One thing I do want to point out is that we did have one committee member who provided some additional funding over the $590,000. So we did have to kind of tweak that a little bit as we were looking at some of the numbers. But you can see the breakdown between capital funding between each of the committee members who filled out a budgeting tool, marketing funding for each of the committee members who filled out a tool, and then event funding. And for committee member number 1, you see they did not use the additional $50,000 in reserves. So the total that they allocated was $540,000. You can see they allocated all $540,000. For committee member number 2, they did use the $50,000 and they allocated all $590,000 of the funding with that extra $50,000. And then committee number 3, you can see committed a little bit more than the $590,000. And so this was something we had to take into account when we were looking at the averages. And so we did adjust committee number 3, but we also pulled just the pure averages and then the adjusted averages as well. So you can see in just the averages, there is an overspending of just above $11,000, and that's reflective again of what one committee member not using reserves and the other committee member expending a little bit more. And then our adjusted percentages as well. You can see the breakdown, like I mentioned, of capital funding, marketing funding, and event funding between each of the committee members that use the tool. And before I move on, I just want to take a pause and see if there's any questions from committee members that might be looking for a little bit more information.
Just the second sheet.
Or a second sheet.
Well, I just handed out the wrong one. I think Ruth got one copy of that one, and this one should be passed out. So this one is actually what the information we're going over, so.
Skip you.
So I gave Ruth both of them.
Okay,
There you go.
okay.
So now everybody should have this information in front of them. And so the detailed breakdown that you all are now looking at also shows each of the individual fundings per event per committee member. And we have highlighted, just to kind of call this out so you can see it very clearly, events that were not funded, and that's highlighted in yellow. We will go over each one of these, but I just wanted to pause and see if there was a question before I jumped into
So
that.
yellow means that they didn't fund them at all, okay?
Correct, yep.
Okay.
So what we're showing up here is, so it looks a little bit more gold up on this copy, so we made a notation of that. But what this is showing is the capital request, and it is showing what was unfunded and what members funded for just capital requests. And then what the average of those capital requests were, and then what the adjusted average of those capital requests were. Any questions on this slide? Did a very similar thing for events. So what this is showing again is all of the events. And you can see the gold highlights events that were not funded using the tool, and then what the average and the adjusted average for each of these events. We did have a couple of events. I want to highlight that multiple people who use the tool did not fund. And that's going to become important when we look at some of our foundations for several of the options that the city put together. Moving forward. Any questions on events? Okay. And then we did the same thing for marketing as well. And once again, gold indicates that there was no funding provided to that particular marketing application. And you can see the averages and then the adjusted averages based off of the tool. Any questions on marketing? Right. So this is the same slide that I had up here just a second ago. Just kind of wanted to go back to it now that you've seen and you've got all of the materials in front of you. But not only does it show what was expended and per each member, again, it shows you that breakdown, and you can see pretty consistently across committee members, about 40+% went to capital, and about 21% went to marketing, and then 42% went to event funding. So there was a pretty even split between capital and event funding, and a little bit less for marketing across the committee members.
Can you expand that a little bit as make it bigger? So maybe even if the static portion on the right side doesn't exist anymore on screen.
Yeah, Sadie, if you want to hit Control+, that should bring it up a little bit closer.
There, bring it down a little bit.
Better?
Yeah, you can bring it down just a touch so we can get the full.
And so this orange one, again, is the averages of all of the committee members who use the tool, and then we have the adjusted average as well.
Which is the same as this small box down here on your sheets.
Correct, yep, and you've got all that information. You might just need to get a magnifying glass out. So.
Okay. I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sadie, if you don't mind taking us out. So using this information, we did create two options for the committee to consider, but these are just considerations and something we can build off of. And what served as foundations of these options were the following three items. So number one, funding would be allocated to some degree to most applications that scored 2 out of 3 for funded by this committee. So if there were 2 out of 3, most likely it received funding in both options. There are a few exceptions and I'll highlight those. And they're primarily new city requests. So if they are new city requests in several of the options, the 2 options, they did not receive funding. Fully fund RAC and museum operations. That is kind of the baseline of both of the options. And then, as mentioned, with the exception to number one, do not fund new city requests for 2024. One of the things, as we're looking through this, and I know you all went through this too, because you've gone through the budget tool, is there is a significant more in submissions and asks than there is for funding. And so one of the things we did take a look at as we were trying to create some options was, what would be some kind of equitable efforts moving forward with city funding. And so again, fully funding the RAC and the museum, but then taking a really good look at any new requests coming from the city. And again, these are just some options for you all to start with. So option number one, which we're calling the spread, would add the $50,000 to the $540,000 for a total of $590,000. And it would allocate funding based primarily on LTAC committee averages from the budget tool. So just to go over that really quickly, and this is your second sheet now. So if you move away from the committee ones, it is now the colorful headers with the green and the tan. So option one is here in the green. And what you can see is we have applied, again, that whole idea of the foundations from the options of fully funding the RAC and the museum, not funding new city initiatives, and then spreading out funding based on the budget tool allocations. And for some of them, we had to tweak them a little bit, and I'll highlight a few that we tweaked. And that was primarily around some of our marketing funding here. There was North American Talk was a little bit less, so I do want to highlight that. But there were some tweaks that we had to make, again, based on some of the averages. Any questions on option number one? And I guess before I ask that, another thing I wanted to highlight too is that this column is showing you the difference from funding in 2023. Because this is the spread option, you can see that there is a pretty significant difference between some of the funding items. But this was again based off of the information we received from the budget tool.
So just for disclosure purposes, I am the standout member whose numbers are not reflected in the averages. I tried to do it on my city iPad, and you can't save it to the desktop on your city iPad, nor can you edit the budget tool on that iPad. So I had to go and do it all manually, type it in into my phone because it was what I had available with me at the time, and email it out that way. But we
did not get it.
Yeah, we didn't communicate. We didn't get the communication. Shows it sent, but it doesn't show it received. So you don't see mine reflected in these averages. And I had some different thoughts on what should be funded. So just FYI on that piece right there. And then secondly, I wanted to say, you remember last year we had talked about, are we really getting the word out on LTAC dollars and getting them, enough or the most that we can get in terms of submissions, right? And it seems like we kind of blew that out of the water, and our marketing must have worked really well, or our getting the word out must have worked really well.
For the asks.
For the
improved.
asks. Because that was last year's concern for
Yeah.
me was, do people really know?
Mhm.
Yeah, and apparently they do.
So are we gonna go through talk about each one of
If
these?
time will allow, can we
Sure.
do a line by line?
Do you want us to do both options first and then go back and do detailed options, just so you have a kind of an understanding of the general differences before
Yeah.
we go line by line?
Yeah, we'd like to hear what you guys prepared.
Sure. Sure. So this is option one, and again, what the orange here is highlighting are unfunded requests, and this was again based off of either no new city requests or 2 out of the 3 did not provide funding for that particular item. And then, as you can see, these averages kind of mirror fairly closely what the averages from the budget tool were, with a few exceptions.
Shannon, I'm gonna zoom in just one click. Thank you.
So do you want to move us over just a little bit so we can, there we
There we
go,
go.
perfect, yep. Put this over here for right now. So again, just pretty closely mirrors with some tweaks based on some of the averages and some of the foundations.
And this is the suggested, the first of the
This
suggested.
is option one, yep,
Option
and this
one.
is the spread, and we have option two, and then there is a third option too, which is to go through with this body and kind of figure out a third option. So are we ready to move on to option two? All right, so do you want to zoom us out? So just before we do, just to kind of recap, with option one, you can see that this mirrors very closely to what this body came up with, again, because it was based off of the averages with the total use of funding, the percentage going to capital, the percentage going to marketing, and the percentage going to event funding. Moving on to option two, we're calling this the legacy, although it's not exactly a repeat of 2023, but it does allocate funding primarily based on what funding was allocated to in 2023, in addition to those foundational elements. So a couple of new requests that were not city requests do have some funding going to it based out of 2 out of 3 committee members providing funding for it. But it adds the additional 50,000 for a total of 590,000. Again, it allocates funding primarily based on 2023 funding. And this, out of the 2 options, is the city recommended option or preferred option. But again, this is at the discretion of the committee to discuss in more detail. So what this is showing you here, and this is again provided in the materials in front of you. So if you just scroll up once, is what the funding provided, again, kind of using what we've already talked about, and then what the difference between 2023 was. So again, matching that 2023, that legacy, right, of the previous year's funding. It does call out places where funding has increased. As an example here, Ollie Town Soccer in this particular example had an increase in funding based off of some of the feedback we had received as part of the budget tool. And then again, not funding things that received no funding from 2 out of the 3 LTAC members, increasing funding for some of the items that received high marks from the committee on the budget tool, and then also new events as well. And Sadie, if you can scroll down a little bit, you can see though the blue all match again what was funded at the previous levels. And then when you get to marketing, this is where some of the biggest changes occurred. And this was based off of feedback we received from the budgeting the budgeting tool. So you can see a reduction in funding going to several of the marketing entities based off of what we received. Any questions about option 2 at this point? So if you want to just zoom us out, perfect.
Don't go too far out.
And then, there we go. Just to kind of recap and make sure I'm recapping that's option 1. We went back a few. Option 2, you can again see the breakdown, and it's capital 44%, marketing 20%, and event funding 37%. And what I did want to highlight here with option 2 is the funding is split between city and non-city at exactly 50%. Option 3 would be some other option not contemplated in the 2 options above, and some examples based off of some of the feedback that we heard from you all would be to not add the $50,000, which would have to do some significant reductions to what was provided in option 1 and option 2, and then different funding levels for submissions based at the discretion of this body.
So the 50,000 was from the wayfinding signs, right?
Correct.
And Troy, do you remember in the past how much we have ever dipped? We dipped into the reserves at some point
Sure.
a year or 2
Yeah,
ago.
we've gone into the budget
Yeah.
that way probably the last 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, yeah.
But we definitely have used reserves in the last couple.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay.
Just real quick before we get too far, Troy, the RAC synthetic field replacement placeholder, how long has that been there?
Probably that same range, that 5 to 7 year range.
5 to 7. All right. I'm just wondering, do we have a schedule on that? Or is that something that, are those some reserves that we could consider using as well?
I think we're about 7 years away from the next round of field replacements. So we just replaced every field probably about 3 to 5 years ago.
Okay.
And they last about 10 years.
All right, so there's something that could be done there as we get into, before we get into the line by line. See, Einmaleins, as they say in Germany.
I would rather, there's 353,000 in reserves if we chose to go that route. Versus, I just, the RAC is such an instrumental part in bringing lodging tax dollars to our community. And if we don't keep it up, I'm just kind of leery of
Well,
dipping into that myself.
I am too,
Yeah.
I am too, and as I thought about it a little bit, then I thought, if, let's say we went in 100 on that, and we did request in the next budget cycle from the council to replenish that 100. There, we have some options with the council potentially to replenish those dollars if we look at those dollars and think, okay, we can have a really successful next year if we, fund this or fund that or whatever the case may be. So I just wanted to make sure that I open that option up just a little bit so that we could, consider some of these other items as we go and do our, line by line observance. So.
So one comment I would just make, and just to, I know the committee is well aware, but also for anybody who might be watching, but obviously anytime you use reserves for potential ongoing requests, that can be problematic in the future for continuation of funding events at the same level.
Right.
Very true.
I don't want to start a standard where we took it out this year and then next year,
Yeah.
are we repaying it? So are we then putting a deficit back there to put money in there,
It's a
to
cycle.
replace what we took out this year?
Very true, because if we get higher asks next year, then we would want to potentially do it again or at another level.
Taking out of that cookie jar and then all of a sudden when we need the money, it's not there.
But it's same is true with the wayfinding signs. We delete that and then what do we don't have it anymore, or we have to do a replacement for it.
Right, but that project, correct me if I'm wrong, was one and done, or we had a round 2 and that got completed as well without use of the LTAC dollars. So there was already other money, so this is just, I don't feel like this one is.
But if I could maybe just add a little bit to that too, I think, obviously there could be a future request for signs if needed, but yes, correct, we had previous phases that are complete. I also do want to draw attention to though, that if we're looking at 2023 funding to 2024 potential funding, we're also reducing the reliance on reserves as well. So it's going down from what we have done in previous spending cycles.
So at this point, do we want to, we've seen you have another option?
Well, the option 3 would be to go line by line and fill it out based off of what this committee would like to move forward. We just took the best available data that we had and feedback from you all and created 2 options. And so we could certainly put up the spreadsheet and go item by item, but we did want to provide a good foundation for the conversation.
Right.
And since we're scheduled till 10 and it's not even 9 yet, maybe we can just kind of start going line by line and just
Yeah,
taking
I
a look
agree.
at,
Yeah.
each of these items.
Mhm.
All right, so Cindy, do you want to do some typing for us?
So the first one is the consideration for the regional athletic complex maintenance and operations.
So this one's been on for a while.
Yeah.
And I know that the RAC I'm hoping that one day the RAC will become self-sufficient. I think we all are, and the council is hoping that as well. I actually funded this at 160. And I know that everybody else went all in on it, which is fine. I'm not trying to, say that we should reduce it. I just was trying to make room for some other stuff.
Well, if yours is 160, then 3 people reduced it, 1 funded fully. So just FYI.
I reduced it as well, so just in the spirit of trying to be fair to everybody and just
Spread it across.
spread it across. And you brought up an interesting not concept, an idea at last meeting where we weren't really getting all the receipts. Like if they had like a surplus and they didn't spend it all, we didn't know, you know what I mean? So it's almost like, is this 180,000 like to the dot, like we absolutely need this amount? Versus like, this is just a general idea, just to be, and I think a lot of these people do ask. Just on the safe side more, like most of my dealings too, people ask for more than what they actually need. And then just to have that little safety net, so I just had that idea in my head when I was filling this out. It's like, is this an exact science? And it seemed like when I was going through the packet too, it didn't seem that way. So I just really kind of scaled back a little bit.
So a couple of comments on there, if I could. Number one, I think the RAC does use all of the funding that it is provided. Like the deputy mayor mentioned, there are a lot of other funding sources too that go into the operations and maintenance of the RAC. And it is also the primary driver for heads in beds here in the city of Lacey as well as Thurston County. And that's why in our options and our foundations, we said, rather than take away from new events that the city had applied for, to apply it to continue the operation of that primary driver for heads in beds here in the city of Lacey.
Go ahead, Troy.
Maybe to provide a little more detail on the RAC's budget and its need for subsidies. So this is a well-used facility. I think that the RAC operators are doing everything it can. But I recently made a comment on the RAC financial plan that the only way to produce more money is to add more weekends to the year. I mean, there's 52 weekends and we can't change that. But to maybe the deputy mayor's point, that the RAC is funded at about a 50% level. It's self-sufficient to 50%. And in my experience with parks facilities, that is the gold standard. So if you could get to 50% self-sufficient, that's probably about as good as we could expect. So this is a operation that is heavily subsidized, including the use of this $180,000.
Yeah. I'm not for, nope. I am not for cutting their budget or their request.
Troy,
That's just-
one of the things that I thought of when I was filling this out is about unused funds. And I don't know that we have like a breakdown for funds that didn't get used in previous years. Maybe funds that didn't get fully expended in the previous cycle. Is that part of this, the
Reserves,
the
wouldn't it
reserves
be?
number?
Yeah, wouldn't it be, and have it, I think probably to your point has the reserves fluctuated a lot? Is
Yeah,
what you're
like-
saying, yeah,
Like, let's say, for example, we're looking at this reserve number and, 150 of it is simply monies that didn't get expended in a previous cycle, right?
can you tell us that from what our reserves were last year to this year, maybe? Is that what
Yeah.
you're asking? Yeah.
I'm really just kind of looking to see, what monies did go out that we
I think
funded.
some are a little bit more, if I remember.
This is gonna be a little hard to see in terms of the use of reserves. Just 'cause I only have 1 year's worth of reserves balance. We've stayed pretty steady. I mean, as we discussed from the questions earlier, we have used reserves here in the last couple of years. We're definitely going to use a large portion of this year's budget reserves, just by the fact that we have $250,000 in the budget and have actually already paid for the capital improvements at the Washington Center. So at least 250,000 is 353. I mean, it's pretty much already been used.
Okay.
But I think this gives a little bit of a historical perspective in terms of, what our events, what our programs that we've supported over the last 3 years. So you have 2022, 2023, and then of course you have the 24 requests. And if you just, kind of go across the line, you can see that from our marketing partners, they definitely spend 100% every year. I mean, it's just typically just a quarterly payment But then you get into some of the other events, you know, again, this is 22 here in columns E and F. You could see back in 2022, the events that did occur pretty much incurred the costs that we awarded. You know, you get really close here on the 4th of July as an example, 5,000. I mean, you can see that if the event does occur, that typically uses the total award. And so far, we're seeing that in 2023. 2023 here is in the H and I columns. I mean, see Lacey Pond Fair has already occurred, of course, and it's expended just about its full allotment. And I think we should expect the same thing for 2023. So that's to say that I think this cash or reserve, use of reserves is probably going to come pretty close.
Sure. Thank you, Troy.
Thanks, Troy.
Because the only way it wouldn't if they didn't get their receipts in. And it didn't fit into the categories that they can reimburse them for.
Correct, right.
Because I remember one time I put something in that I couldn't get reimbursed for, and I said, really? You're not gonna pay my phone? No. Anyway, it's just a little side note.
So then based on that information, I would probably fully fund them.
I know that one day we're gonna get a little closer to, maybe if we have an MPD, we may not have to make this decision on an annual basis. It's something that can be made at
When
a
we
tax
get it.
level. Yes,
When we get
when
it.
we get that. Last time narrowly failed and
No.
yeah, and so hopefully in the future, that'll be something that we can, so let's just talk about, do we want to go full all the way in on the rack, do the 180?
Yeah.
I'll go all in on the rack. It is the primary driver for heads and beds in this community. And as we, have added new things like the rugby, I'm excited about, how much more that space is going to get used and how much more attention it's going to draw to the area. My excitement kind of stops at, cost. And I know that new project, as you guys know, transportation is going to be paving the final section. There's going to be a bus lane. There's going to be EV chargers, all these additional things that are coming to the rack, which makes it, an even bigger draw.
Great.
All right, Mr. Shen. Sure. No, so if you're at 140, still say 100, whatever it is. I don't know your number.
Well, like that was my main concern, is that if they were actually using all those funds. I just saw $180,000 was kind of an exact number too, and like I said, based on my own experience dealing with other people and dealing with different vendors and stuff and accounts, they always ask for a bigger ask than what they actually need. But Troy and Shannon, sounds like that they do expend all those funds, so I don't have much to say that, just kind of expounding on what you guys said, that it is a main driver and that they really need it, so. Thank you.
Seems like it's been 180 for quite a while too. I mean, for a few years now, so.
Yes, it was historically 160, I believe.
I remember the 160. Okay, so we're all agreement on the rack?
Sure.
All right. And we have till 10.
Correct.
Okay, we'll try not to. But we've had these discussions.
How's the fastest, is there anybody, because we only have until 10, is there a way that, are there any that we're not funding that we could look at those or kind of move because I'm worried that if we spend
Oh.
5 minutes on each one of these, we're gonna be here until.
Skip around,
yeah.
you mean, and go to the ones that
Yeah,
say 0, 1,
Is there
2.
any- or,
So maybe my recommendation would be like, if you want to, like, starting with option 2, which was again, kind of that legacy from last year, and maybe
Okay.
starting that, using that as a.
and then we can change accordingly, maybe.
Could be one way to approach
I
that.
think that might be a better way, because if there were two people, correct me if I'm wrong, Shannon, if 2 people voted on it, then it was good
Correct.
to go.
Correct.
I would rather go with that option and then change those numbers if we could do that, because then we have a better
Baseline.
baseline.
If that,
Cause
if that
if
option,
we're gonna spend 7 minutes per line, we're not gonna get out of here on a,
And we can, so here's option 2, and here's the numbers, and here's what we're filling out, and we can certainly kind of go
Okay.
line by line, if that,
Yeah.
if that helps to your point.
that's great.
if that'll bring efficiency to the meeting, absolutely.
So in option 2, the recommendation for the Lacey Museum was funding 100% of the $48,500. So using that as the baseline.
Mhm.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with it.
I don't have an opinion yet, but yes, let's go with it. This is 2 out of 3.
It's 2 out of 4, so we have to
Oh, yeah.
3 out of 4 now, so.
You didn't submit, so.
So for
Yeah.
the,
I actually have my submission here.
Yeah, I believe you.
I am really bummed that we're not giving them a golf cart because as somebody
Yeah, I
that does
am
it,
too.
as somebody that does events, it's really important to be able to move around quickly. And I did like the presentation where they did say, that it can be used for other events within the city. And I really thought that was really cool that they were willing to share. So I would love to come back and see this one and see if there's any way that we can fund that golf cart.
I
I,
funded the golf cart at 25%.
And I funded it at 82%. So sorry, I'm lying to you, 88%. So
I funded it too, but yeah, because as a person that does events, yeah. And I can appreciate those people. The rack is huge. I mean, even just to use it there, it's huge.
and it's getting bigger.
Yeah,
It is,
it's gonna,
and
yeah.
it's getting busier.
So can we fund them? I don't know.
I still don't see the need for them though. I mean, I understand that it is a convenience thing, but like in the spirit of trying to fund these other events that might bring. And like, we're like, I don't know, like, I'm just being stingy probably, because we're already giving like $180,000, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
plus another $8,000 just for golf carts. I'm just like, I mean, like, I don't know, I just think that there could be a better way to do it. Like if someone has a pickup truck, just throw in a pickup truck, like drive out there or something, you know? I would almost concede to almost saying like, let's give them like $8,000. How many carts is that?
one,
It's one.
That's just one
It's
cart.
one cart.
one refurbished cart.
On refurbished cart?
Yeah,
Correct.
they're expensive. Ours was $50,000 for our golf cart at our house.
$50,000. Like, are we talking
It's like
about
a cart.
like a golf cart you drive around on a golf course, or like a golf cart?
This
like
one's
what you see in the airport or
remodified.
something?
It's a
This
little
one's
more.
modified, yeah.
This is more of a utility cart.
But I do want to make the point that it can go places and access places that a truck might not be able to, just based on some of the size limitations.
And plus, when you get to an event like Fun Fair, you can't take a truck on the grounds.
No.
And I know the last time I looked at my walking for Fun Fair was like, I don't know, 8 or 9 miles. I mean, it
Counting
was
steps.
crazy. It's crazy.
The average recommendation based on the submitted budget tools for this was $5,000, just to let you know.
So like, if we did fund it in a little way and they somehow maybe I mean, like the RAC does have other contributors, correct?
We do, and certainly anything that would be unfunded would be something that the city council would have to contemplate for funding the remainder.
Yeah, Malcolm,
Right,
it's on you.
right.
So I've
we put-
highlighted this one as
Yeah.
a,
Could we
Yeah.
put 5,000 in there and just come
Yeah.
back to it? Cause we know it's still
Yeah.
highlighted.
perfect.
Next is the Washington Center for Performing Arts.
I'm gonna abstain.
So the overall ask for this was $35,000.
Previously, it was 30,000, and so that's where, again, kind of building off of option 2 of a legacy, we did $30,000.
I funded them at 30. And that was after I completed my sheet and realized that I was over. And then I had to kind of go back and start, you know, trimming
See,
the
I didn't
fat.
even do
Absolutely. I
that.
did
I
the same
thought,
thing. Yeah, it was like, oh my God, it's already red.
Yeah.
I gotta start trimming.
Yeah.
Okay,
So proceed with 30,000 at this point?
yeah, at this point.
Next is the rugby season for men's Division I and Division II. Their ask for this year was $66,044.
And so again, with this being option 2 of the legacy, we provided what was funded to the rugby club previously at the same amount,
Which was,
$27,230.
okay, I funded them at 30. I appreciate the presentation, and at the, there was a lot of future hope in the presentation. And I really wanted to believe, but man, that was a huge jump for me.
Yeah,
And
was too
I
big
just
for
couldn't
me.
I couldn't leap that chasm all at
Yeah.
once.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put 30.
Andrew, do you have anything
Yeah,
to
Mr.
say?
Shin.
I wanted to fund them more, but that's fine. 30,000 is good. You made a good point.
It's a starting point, yeah.
You know, I enjoyed his presentation and it brings heads in bed, so
Yeah.
I was very interested. So 30,000 is fine.
So for the next item, which is the Ollie soccer, again, based off of the feedback we heard of increasing some of the sports leagues, we did increase this one $5,000 from what it had previously received because it had also received significantly less than the other sport venue. And so that one, we put in there $15,000.
I funded them at 35.
I funded them at 40, so yeah.
I just felt like on this one,
I don't even.
their new stadium is now officially in city limits, and I did go look at the map. And it, a whole nother discussion about the map, but they are within city limits and they are now officially using that stadium as their home stadium.
And 3 of their 5 leaders are living in Thurston County, according to the presentation, so.
Yeah.
And graduates of our high schools here.
And so this is their second year of asking from us. And so we still consider them to be new. I was really happy that the USL chose the city of Lacey for them to have their home stadium at. And I kind of want to foster that and get into that good relationship with that entity. I funded them at 35 for those reasons, because of the heads and beds potential that they bring. So if you guys, we can. I don't know if
I'm
we
also
can do-
comfortable. I mean, like I said, I did 40.
Yeah,
For
I
sure.
funded them pretty well too, actually, if I remember correctly, just because again, it's a sports event. And sports events bring people, just what we need. So
Yeah,
I did fund them more than 15,000 for sure.
once I got
But
through
we
my
only,
sheet,
we gave them 10, right, last year,
Correct.
okay.
And the average recommendation based on the budget tool submissions for this event was $39,333 between the 3 scores, just to let you know.
so we were all right in there. We all kind of felt the same about these guys.
And what I really appreciated about Ryan is that he, there was that mistake that he found, which was I didn't think about my stadium. I thought of like my practice games versus my scrimmages, my practices versus my tournaments. And so he hadn't funded, so he had to find that shortfall.
Yeah,
So I think he was really honest with us about why that extra funding was needed. So I really appreciated that.
The need seemed a lot greater.
So what are we saying then for them?
So would we take the recommendation of the 30, just for now, 39,000?
so you were 40, I was 30,
I was like 35.
I was 23 or, I don't know where
I was,
yeah.
sorry, I was also 35.
There was one for 55,000, 40,000, 23,000, and Deputy Mayor, the addition of yours.
So I say 30, 39, if we could do 39,000 and then go back and correct it.
I'm in.
39,000 placeholder.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because again, when we go through this, it's gonna turn red real
Right.
fast at the bottom.
When I was leaving
Right.
here from our last meeting, the
Right.
Parks Director was pulling up. And I told her about what he had told us about his shortfall and how he, kind of missed the mark a little bit and maybe didn't fully plan out his last year's budget. And I told her, hey, can you reach out to this guy and just, maybe give him that mentorship, that guidance, so it doesn't happen again.
It's very cool.
Well, the next one on the list is Capital Lake Fair. In option 2, this one was recommended at $10,000 to match last year's award.
I'm in with that.
I'm in with that.
I didn't fund it at all. Because Capital Lake Fair is gonna happen no matter if we fund them or not. And when she said that it was for like tiaras and sashes, I was like, I'm out already, so that's just my opinion though. I mean, did that, again, just being stingy, just like, is that really necessary? I mean,
I considered the heads and beds value when I was making my funding decision.
Do they promote Lacey's?
They said they
hotels?
would.
They would, yeah.
right, but you know, another thing that I considered too is Olympia just added like 200, 300 plus rooms to their stable almost, you know, with the Courtyard Marriott opening up already, with the new Wood Spring Suites opened up. I mean, I don't know, it just seems like they'll congregate more to that before the boots get to like basically the scraps from the table, honestly.
Right.
My opinion, again, don't let it, you know, weigh too much on you guys, but that was just my opinion.
We
No,
like,
it's a good conversation we need to have. And it was like, I remember when they first asked us for money, it was for a banner and this and that. Well, they have the banner, they have Lacey on it, so we can't repay for the banner. I don't know. Yeah, and so then part of it is going to these other festivals. And anyway,
Are you both thinking under 10,000, like more 7,500? Or
Gracious.
Probably half of what they're asking.
Mhm.
And
half of what they're asking?
I, you know,
Which is-
Let's put that
Well,
in
they're
there.
asking 14,000.
75.
thousand.
One less zero.
one less zero, sorry.
Thank you.
And then we'll highlight.
All right,
And
so
then we'll just see how far we get into this. Yeah.
So for the next item for the glow in the park, again, I just want to point out that the reason that we didn't fund new city events was again to try to help balance and then also recognize that there were a lot of requests. And then, you know, with the particular number of these events too. With a number of these events too, the budget funding was still a question mark. And so that is why, again, with new city funding events, we decided to really focus those attentions on existing events and then the rec operations and the museum operations.
Man, this one's hard because I'm like, this is new and this is something that hasn't been done before in our community. And you know, I would say in Thurston County, minus the Wooden Boat Festival, they did the drone. But
Yeah.
I'm bummed to see this, but I would lean towards the not funding. I mean, I
To
want to
see if
fund
there's
it,
a
I want
way
to fund
they
it, but
can
if
do
there's
it.
a way they can do it, and maybe we can help them next year.
I'm bummed too, because I do think it's something unique for our area. And I looked at, so I was thinking about, you know, because I think the comment was made about how much money we're putting towards city funded events. But I looked at like Olympia Parks and Rec, and they don't do anything. And I mean, and we should pride ourselves on all these events we do in Lacey that don't cost our community any money. And it's, anyway, I would like to see some go towards it to see if they can pull it off at a reduced amount. But that's me. Huh?
You're good,
Can
you're good.
Turn
Yeah,
your
very cool.
cameras
it is very
Like I
cool.
said, it's very
Sorry.
cool. It's like you said, it's a new event. Who knows what's gonna happen? Hasn't been vetted or anything like that, so.
Right.
I wouldn't mind throwing them a bone, you know,
Yeah.
not 25,000, of course, because, you know, just because of the budget constraints that we have, but
I funded them at 18 grand. Is what I funded them on my spreadsheet.
I funded them at 15, and part of my reasoning for that was, it's a new event and it's a bold thing to do. We all know how difficult events can be to set up and pull off. But this is something that, like Ruth said, is unique. It's something that I don't think we have in this area. I've seen it in Lakewood. And I don't know why I always point to her when I say Lakewood, but I have seen it there. It's a good draw. It does not, I don't believe it to be a multi-day event. That was one of the drawbacks.
yes.
But like Ruth said, we do so much for the community that we draw other communities to us, which I love 100%. And I didn't want to just shut them down and say, hey, no, don't, you know, because I thought if there's somehow they can pull, you know, if we give them that opportunity and we fund them at 15 and they can go back and look at their budget and supplement and make up the difference, I would be really happy to see that as well.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm just thinking that, you know, I want it to happen. I just couldn't go all in on it just yet because it's also the carts and it's also the rack.
And I do believe during the presentations that they did mention this would be 100% of the funding, or they wouldn't be able to host the event.
I thought it was, I recall that it was, they would try to pull money from something else.
And that's what I
The
was
other,
hoping
the other
for.
funding side of this was all on sponsorship, because they did not put in, I believe, a budget request for this particular item at this point, so it would have to come from LTAC
Sponsorship.
or sponsorship, and
So we're then 10,000, they'd have to find an additional 10,000 in sponsorship.
20 or 15. I think their total ask was 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we go in 10, they'd have to go 15.
The trial by fire, I mean, let's fund them a little
Mhm.
bit, let them
Yeah.
see if they can stand on their own two legs.
Right.
Could we go 50% then? For,
That would be 12.5. I'd be willing to do that. I just know the successful track record that this team has of pulling off really good events. And that's why I'm so hopeful about it. and
yeah, I
willing
mean,
to-
I think it's a great event, and people are always looking for unique draws and things that aren't done everywhere else.
Yeah.
This is one of those.
It is. And see,
However, how do we get there?
Right.
So
I want 15. That's me.
I would be willing to do 15.
For now, as a placeholder. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, 15, and then we'll trim the fat later.
yeah, so.
I can already tell we're already in the red almost.
So we are just doing some bad meeting math. We are approximately around $45,000 to $50,000 if the rest of the items get funding over what our budget is at this point.
Great.
Okay,
Noted.
thank you.
Yep.
I do want to note about the Parks and Recs. I was part of the going out and taking surveys from people that were using our parks. Let's see, not this summer, but last summer. And I received so many compliments about our city and our parks and what we offer our community. So it was really touching to me to think that, oh, I live in Lacey and yeah, I'm really proud of Lacey. So anyway, just a side note, whatever.
You get all the nice people, you get all the horrible people.
Not the horror, yeah.
So moving on, because we are shortly running out of time here. We've got Juneteenth, and our recommendation was $10,000 based off of last year.
Take it.
Take it.
Take it.
Right, next item would be Chris Kringle, and our recommendation again from last year is $9,500.
And they came in at 12.5 this year.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I would also I would say take it.
I'll go with it.
Match last year.
Yeah, match last year's. I guess I'll use my words.
You're fine.
And then for the Lacey Cultural Celebration, matching it again with $9,000 last year,
And their ask this year was,
12,000,
11,000.
11,000.
I would bump that to 10. I'd like to meet them halfway.
10,000?
Wait, their ask was 11?
Yeah,
Yeah, and their previous was 9.
I'd be comfortable at 10, 9, whatever, it's the difference, $10,000.
Well, we shimmy a little.
Bucket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next one is the Lacey Fireworks Spectacular, 3rd of July. And that one is recommended using last year's funding amount of 22,000.
That's cool.
Yeah, I would definitely suggest that. I was actually thinking when we left as well, not only is the park having lots of activity, but also I remember going and all of the neighborhoods around there also had people doing barbecues and other things. So there's a draw more than just right there, you know,
I know.
so I am definitely comfortable with saying take last year's, if not.
Yeah, it's huge drawing
Yeah.
that. So
Oh my
I
goodness,
have
yes.
property within the 1 mile radius. And it's for all those residents in that area, it's a pretty big deal. And we all walk there together and we all walk home together.
Right.
Excellent. Well, the next item is the Lacey in Tune Summer Series. The recommendation for option 2 was to match last year's funding of $18,000,
And this year's ask was,
$23,000.
let's see what I put them.
Okay, let's go with that.
Recommend, yeah.
The next item is the Lacey Market at the Depot. And again, since this was a new city request and we wanted to balance out city requests and other event funding, we did not have any funding for this year. Again, it was a new event.
I'd be willing to take the recommendation of 0 this year.
Second.
I gave them 10, and I gave them 10 because they seem to be a micro business incubator. And I was one of those people who drove by and said, wait a minute, I gotta stop and see what's happening here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I did give them a little bit. What was their ask?
Their ask for this year was 15.
And so I thought, I know Wes works hard at putting these things
Yeah.
together. I kind of wanted to,
But doesn't he contract with somebody to do it?
He does, but that could be
Is
what
that-
pays them.
Oh, but we're paying him now out of something, right?
So, and
Can you help us?
part of the presentation was to be able to use these funds to really expand programming, not just
Okay.
provide what was
Yeah.
already there, but to really augment it. But again, our recommendation was 0 based on the legacy and,
Right.
but it would be for augmenting
So it'd
programming.
be still going on, but it would just not be able to expand it.
yeah, one of the things that I considered when I was going through this was, it appears as though, we know that our mission is heads and beds, right? But I see that a lot of the really smaller micro businesses in the community are benefiting from this committee as well.
Mhm.
And so I just kind of was like, you know what, the benefit to the small business and they bring people, are we getting a latent effect in terms of our mission? And so that was one of the reasons why I've looked at some of the other things that maybe they don't produce as many heads and beds, but they are micro business drivers that could have a secondary effect of additional people in the community. That's, you know what I mean? Is there a latent effect to all these events that we do?
Okay, can I ask you this then? According to my document, I did fund them at 10 on this. Would you be willing to take something away from like the barbecue? Like if we're gonna fund 10 to 1 for Wes's event, would you be more apt to take, instead of the recommendation of 20,000 for the South Sound barbecue, would you knock them down to like a 10
Mr. Wu?
I have maybe a solution.
or a solution?
So this is just my humble opinion. I don't know this is a tourism activity, but we do have economic development monies in our city budget, and it's probably more appropriate to fund this through economic development than
Oh,
tourism.
That would be
Okay.
amazing if that's an avenue that we can take.
Thank you, Troy. Seriously.
As we go through this list, can you, if you feel that there's others that might fit into that bucket of money?
okay,
And I'll acknowledge the city manager is on board with that same recommendation.
okay.
So that being said,
0.
straight to the 0.
Come on, we
Okay.
got time.
Yeah,
for
we
that.
Yeah, we are, we do.
We got a half hour.
Okay, all right, we'll reduce it in,
So that takes us to the barbecue, South Sound Barbecue Festival, which last year we funded it at $20,000. And that would be option 2's recommendation.
I'm not. It's a one-day festival. It's X amount of time, and I think they spend quite a bit of money on marketing, which I didn't get. I don't understand that. So I'm not, no, I don't, 20,000 is too much for a one-day festival.
is out. Are you at 0?
No, not 0.
You're-
I could give them 10, but
Okay.
And the average recommendation based on scorecards was $11,667 based on the 3 budget tools.
I could second that.
I could as well. Can we plug in, do you wanna do 10? Do you wanna plug in
Just
10?
like I'm thinking like, $1,000 here, another $1,000 there, might add up to something funding something else. I'm just, like I said, we're just putting this in,
Right.
we're already in the red, and we're start trimming, we're just trimming.
You're already nervous.
Sadie,
Right.
can we
So
put 10 in?
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is another one of those micro business, small businesses, they come out, I bought some barbecue, I even bought the guy's barbecue sauce. After I, did the whole thing, and if there is, an event that really promotes small businesses, because they write it up in Thurston Talk, Joel, all these different places, hey, here's the people who won the best barbecue in the South Sound, so on, so on. And then maybe those guys get some additional revenue, which of course turns into additional tax dollars. So that was my thinking at the time that I funded them, but I did not fund them at the full 20.
Well, I just think $12,000 for marketing is what we'd be reimbursing them is a lot of money.
Yeah, and how many years have they had this?
Oh,
Oh,
I can tell you probably in a minute, but we can.
And the reason I ask that is because if it's an event that happens the same time, maybe the same weekend every year, maybe the marketing, it doesn't need to happen
No,
as.
like you said, it's a
heavy.
legacy event.
Yeah.
People know
I
what
think we
happens.
started giving them money in 2018.
That sounds about right.
Well, we've got them with a placeholder of $10,000. We can always revisit that one at the end. The next one is the Lacey South Sound Chamber Golf Classic. And this one is recommended funded at a 0. And this is one of those examples where 2 out of the 3 budget tools we received recommended not funding this event at all, which is how we came to that recommendation in option 2. So that's how we kind of came to that recommendation.
That was another one that was a fundraiser for Fun
I
Fair,
know.
and that's how it was established. So,
It kind of seems as
Yeah.
if it's lost its purpose and its intent. And morphed into something else.
well, it's a fundraiser for chamber, so,
Chambers be taking care of it. I'm sorry, just.
okay.
I would go to suggest that we go with the recommendation of 0.
Seems to be a consensus. Let's move on.
So the next event is the Lacey Spring Fun Fair. This one was recommended at $15,000 to match last year's 2023 funding.
I can second that.
I could go with that.
And then below that, we have bunkers, balls, and birdies. This one is again recommended at a 0 because it received 2 out of 3 recommendations not to fund based on those individual budget tools.
I gave them $2,500, but that was just because I was trying to spread the wealth.
I would like to
Trying
match
fund
your
everything.
2,500. I gave them 5, but I would like to, I know it's their first time and I know that Gateway Rotary does good events. And they can draw heads and beds and they're a bunch of business leaders. But I
My
did-
problem was, I heard him say they made $20,000 last year for a first time event.
And was this the
Yes,
same group
that's
that
what-
didn't
yeah,
draw heads and
he said
beds?
that.
I can't remember honestly,
maybe
but
this is
I
an
think I might have
expansion.
missed this, bunkers, balls and presentation.
So, yeah, there, as part of their presentation, they had discussed the very limited heads and beds at this point. And then
Right.
part of their thought was expanding it from what they currently have, but I believe the rest of the comments that
So let's
Bernie, you're correct.
meet them halfway.
Is this a one-day event or?
Well, if they made $20,000 on their first year event, why are we? That's just my question.
Can we highlight this one and move forward and see kind of
Want to
where,
highlight it at a 0 or
highlight it at a
2,500?
0 for now and we'll come back to it.
So the next item is Reach the Beach. Last year, Reach the Beach was funded $5,000. This year, the recommendation is to give them $10,000 based on the average feedback from budget tools and their increased overall ask of $15,000.
This might be the place where we finally all came together on a number. 10 is what I came up with too.
I gave them 7,500.
Oh, well, so
Well-
the average, so somebody
Right.
must have gave them over.
I gave them
Two-
$9,999,
I,
just because, like, how they mentioned, they plan on moving the event to King County.
Start as a starting point in some case.
Well, still, yeah, I mean,
And they didn't have relationships with those.
no, and they
other
didn't even
counties.
ask their LTAC committee for funds either.
Yeah, and
So I'm willing to give them money now that I wasn't, because when I asked if they had gone to wherever the starting point was gonna be, they hadn't reached out to them to help fund this RFP.
Right.
And I think part of the issue could possibly be too, they don't know where the starting point is because they need to do the RFP. And that's part of why they're asking for additional funding. So they have kind of a general awareness of where it could possibly be, but it might not be pinpointed to an exact jurisdiction.
I'm just gonna be honest about something that I felt about this. So I felt like, okay, so you're asking us for money to find out where you can do something in another city,
Exactly.
right? And that part there's a sting that came with that for me.
It bugged me a
Me
lot
too.
because they said, oh, we're getting people from Oregon too. I'm like, then why are you starting it in King County? And we're here. I mean,
Right.
I mean, I wanna help them.
I'm willing to do 5.
I was happy with what I saw out there at the rack and so on.
Yeah.
And their next one is on the 30th of this month.
Correct.
I don't know if I'll be riding in the rain with them, but they've been good to us. What they've started here is cool. I didn't like what about them saying about even, wow, we're looking to
I
move
don't think
it.
they had thought it all through and where they really, and had tried to build relationships with wherever that other starting point was gonna be. And if they had that, I would be willing to meet them partway, but I didn't feel that they had those relationships with.
So I heard 5,000 from the group. Are we comfortable putting that in there right now?
Yes, please. If they said, oh, we're gonna use it to promote it, okay, cool, but finding another place. Exactly.
Excellent. Well, the next item on the list is the South Sound Block Party. The recommendation based on option 2 for that was $2,500. Last year, they were not funded.
What did you put down for your number?
5.
5.
Yep. Well, mine had a caveat. I put 5, or we would match Tumwater this year.
Do we know what Tumwater is?
I think they got like 49 from Tumwater, somewhere in that ballpark, like right at 5.
So 2 of us on the spreadsheet put 10K.
So my comment about that is they will promote Lacey Hotels if we give them money. I didn't like that.
I know
Did I
you didn't.
not
I
hear
know,
that?
I know you didn't. I know you didn't. And I saw you not like it. And then I
Yeah.
didn't like it for you. But at the same time, I was like, wait a minute. If they are gonna promote, Lacey Hotels, and we have to take a $2,500 or $5,000 risk to see if that pans out, then I thought I was willing to take that risk.
And I really liked, and I was on board with that same comment as well. I did like what she said regarding working with our marketing, the city marketing department, and really plugging, what are the areas that you want us to highlight?
Right.
So that's a willingness, and that was something that I hadn't seen from that, because I read that same thing as well, but it was like those weekly pushes on, the Instagram and the socials.
Right.
And I think that's important.
And we could say, hey, here's our hotels, maybe there is one of these hoteliers who'd be willing to give you a block or something along those lines. And we could go over, cancellation policies and these types of things. I think getting into a relationship with these guys at such a small cost could, show us some things, give us some metrics.
Well, and I really like also a lot of their people came from north. So the first city they're gonna come into is here. So if they have to stop for gas, if they have to do other things, they're going to be doing that here. Maybe grabbing a bite to eat and then going on. Granted, it might not be sleeping,
Right.
but we don't know that yet. They are putting money into our community before they get to Olympia.
Last year, we shut them down. We didn't give them a chance. All right, we just said no. I'm not saying that we're harsh or stern about it. I'm just saying we just didn't see the value for us,
Right.
Maybe there is some value to be had.
I agree. I like it's multi-day event. I mean, it's music, people love music. I mean, something that we could foster and kind of stoke the flames a little bit with a little bit of funding, but not the full funding, because we gotta,
We have.
we have
So our recommendation was 2,500. I've heard 5,000 a couple of times, and just to keep us on track on time.
Because it's not in Lacey. And I would not go over $2,500, me personally.
I had 5.
I had 5 too.
I had 5 as well.
Outvoted.
Okay.
I'm kidding, Ruth. We're gonna come back to
Okay.
it. We're gonna come back to it. We'll
No,
come back to it.
okay, thank you.
Next year, you might be surprised.
The next event is the Washington
They're gonna be
State
amazing.
Senior Games. This one is recommended at $15,000 to match last year's funding.
I agree,
I'm good with that.
because they're one of the bigger drivers of people
I had
coming.
15 as well.
Yes, I actually see that back from this
Yeah.
event, so.
I had 10, but I got outvoted, so.
And then below that, we have Wine Fest, Sip, Savor and Shop. This one is recommended at $5,000 to match last year as well.
Wine Fest, or is it your?
It's a three.
Winter, but it does say
Winter.
sip.
Okay, I
So,
was like, wow,
Yes.
I was like, wow, okay,
Winterfest.
okay. I did 2,500, or I did 2,000.
Yeah, it's a 6-hour event. Let's keep that in mind.
And it's at the, is it at the?
Community center.
Okay. I put 5. I'm not 100% stuck on that number, but that's what I put.
I'd be willing to go 2,500.
Same.
It's a 6-hour event.
I didn't fund it at all, so.
Yeah.
2,500?
Yep.
Excellent. The next item on the list was the City of Lacey Public Affairs request for $10,000 for banners. This one was recommended to not fund it as it was a new application this year.
This is also a good item that we might be able to find some additional funding for,
Yeah.
so we don't
Try.
recommend funding it this year.
Yeah, Troy, you know where you can find money.
For banners.
Okay. Because I think the concept, I mean, I love it. I can remember going into, I can't remember what city it was in Oregon now, but I remember thinking, oh, wow, this is great. It was yeah,
The
a lot of communities do that
Yep.
type of thing. Yeah.
The South Sound Chamber, I did 35,000.
And the recommendation based on just that option 2 that we're using as our baseline was $43,270.
I did 50. I'd be willing to meet you guys at the 42 for sure.
Yeah, I think there's some money that we have been giving them to do Discover Lacey, and I think that needs to be revisited, because I did look at the page. It's not updated. There's no events listed. And we got to the point where we were giving Chamber more money to do some promotions that Visitor and Convention Bureau at the time, it was called, wasn't doing that. And it's just kind of not, Discover Lacey, like I say, they had parks, a section where it said parks, and then I looked and there's only a couple of our parks listed, not all our parks were there.
We
It's
have more
like,
parks to Olympia.
Yeah.
We have the most parks.
yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
but there's only 3 listed on that
I
website.
think, yeah,
So with that knowledge, I would like to start us at 35,000, which is half their ask.
I agree.
Cause I don't feel comfortable if the website's not updated and we're not getting, I mean, where's our ROI from that? So
mhm.
Ruth, are you also 35? All right. Committee has spoken.
Excellent. Well, the next option was North Thurston Talk Media Group doing business as Thurston Talk. Based on option 2, this one was recommended at 0 funding this year as it was a first-year application.
totally bummed, but
I am too.
I get it.
Yeah. I get it, because I think we need to look at all our marketing dollars. I mean, and I think this is a great start, but I think they do have a far reach. Thurston Talk does. I mean, they do a good job.
So when I looked at the marketing category as a whole, I thought to myself, this exceeds what one FTE would do and could do for us. If we had like a dedicated person and gave them a budget, what kind of results could we have in that, going that route. I did put Thurston Talk at 10,000. I did put banners at 5, but I'm willing to go with the recommendation of the committee.
We funded them at 25 and also would be willing to go with the recommendation this year.
Yeah, I gave them some money too.
You did?
Mhm.
What'd you give
I think 20.
for Thurston Talk?
Mhm.
I didn't fund them.
I just
So-
felt that their reach was far, I mean, they were using multiple tools to get out there, and I really like that because they can pinpoint people from surrounding communities to come in here. And I really like that model, because again, it's about heads and beds, and they had a whole jurisdiction down in Oregon, and it's a day trip or an evening overnight trip. And I know a lot of people that, go from Bend to here or vice versa, spend the night and go home. So I really liked what they were offering and that they were pulling content and helping out. So
They do a good job. They do a really good job.
So what is the committee's recommendation?
I'm stuck.
And we got the VCB here coming up too, isn't that their job? to
And
do
we
that
can
as well?
always-
It is.
Yeah.
So like we're kind of doubling up on something.
See, we've been doing that with Chamber, VCB, and now Thurston Talk is
Right.
thrown into that mix
I would be
too. So
willing to take funds from the VCB and throw it into the Thurston Talk if you guys wanted to do that, but I don't see any other way of funding that in the slightest without
So
doing
why
something.
why don't we highlight this one for right now? And I think your question is getting to the next item
Yep.
and then circling back to it, just to kind of see where we're at.
So the final item we have is the VCB. The recommendation based on option 2 for this is $100,000. That is $10,000 less than last year's award.
And I wouldn't want to cut into the VCB too much, just for the fact that they do a lot of work, especially with pulling businesses to the rack. I mean, we heard a number of businesses talk about how they work with Jeff and how they get things. And I really don't want to interrupt that relationship, especially because we have all sat here and agreed. We started this meeting as a bookend with the rack. And so, and that's part of the plan, is to get people in here from different communities. And we heard multiple groups with presentations say how often they work with Jeff at the VCB. So
I'm
I
surprised.
really am uncomfortable going much more. I think I funded them at, I think I was
80,000.
80,000. So I wouldn't want, I'm looking at that again, and that was because I was spreading the love, but I would love to keep it at 100,000 if we can.
Note, they actually get $2 from every room that we sell and they see in all of Thurston County. So it's not like they're
Right.
not getting any funding from
Right.
elsewhere.
Right.
So
Correct. They are bringing on they have brought on several staff members as well. So
But they closed down their storefront
they did.
and then they put that back onto Chambers. I mean, and.
But they also have the
kept-
CTA program, which isn't free and,
Right.
to put on and to be part of, and we all should be communities, CTAs for our community. I don't know how many people have gone through the program here, so.
I was also happy to hear how many times different people came in here and referenced the VCB. And we do have members on the board now, and actually staff members from the city on the board now. So I feel like we're getting a little more traction. I am enjoying the direction that Annette is taking it and all the extra things that she's doing to make it a success. And now this, under her leadership, is the first time that I've sat in presentations and heard about the direct effect that they are having with the people that are bringing heads to beds in this community. I'd be fine with 100. Sure.
Let's put that in there.
So looking at that, we can see that we're
Are we in the red?
in the red 22,000.
Oh, that's not bad.
So maybe taking in this opportunity
Yeah.
to,
Let me just say that is also using the $50,000 as well. So I do want
Yeah,
to
but still,
clarify
yeah.
that, so. Yep.
But still, we have 300, I don't know. Anyway, that's better than I did.
Yeah.
so we did have some yellow categories highlighted to revisit at this time, if we wanted to take a look at those.
Troy, was there any of these other ones that you think of could secure some funding from some other areas?
Not as clean as the Evo food truck.
Right. Okay.
So the first one up there is the RAC's request for that golf cart. Again, the recommendation for that was at $0 as a new application. The committee was looking around $5,000.
Okay. So we, at this point, need to cut 22,000,
Correct.
okay?
I'm just gonna look at this as a necessity. I mean, it sounds like you guys really need this,
Oh,
so.
yeah.
If you really need it, then let's go with it, but we still need to realize that we're gonna be defunding a lot of people too at the same time.
But
20
this is a one-time ask.
Yeah, this is a,
The maintenance, I mean,
Yeah.
everything takes maintenance. I mean, they're probably
But I
gonna come
think
back
you
and
can
do
find
even golf carts. Repairs, exactly. Even
Right.
bodies, I mean, everybody needs
Right.
maintenance.
They're not gonna come back to us and ask for maintenance on
I
it.
think they will.
think
well,
so?
I mean, we'll see. I don't know. I don't know that it's gonna be a big ask for maintenance, but that's something that we could also put in our notes is, you know, we can put stipulations. We've done that before with certain things.
We have a maintenance department. What do you mean? No.
So we, just drawing back, we've got 8 minutes here left. We can certainly go over. I just wanna, but keeping
Yeah.
us on time. So we've got a few other items here that have highlighted yellow, and the two were our Ollie Soccer, and then Capital Lake Fair, and then the Glow in the Park as the next three.
Ole Soccer was in option 2 initially recommended at $15,000. Again, last year's funding for that was $10,000.
And for Glow in the Park, I just also want to highlight that our recommendation was again 0 for this year to kind of establish and see for maybe a future year, because it is a new city program.
Gotcha. So they're not gonna go somewhere else with this, are they? They're just, if they don't get funded by us and the event doesn't happen, they plan on moving it to a different city,
Which
one?
event?
the glow in the dark.
No,
That's-
that is
no,
our
that's the
Parks
Lake
Department.
That's city,
Okay,
That's- Yeah.
city staff event.
yeah, I would axe that this year and just ask them to come back next year. I mean, if we're in $22,000 deficit, that's just my recommendation.
I'm okay with that if we could take the three of those thousands away and put it towards the golf cart. So
I can agree with that, yeah.
move 15 to 0 and fully fund the golf cart for
At 8.
There we go. So then we've shimmied 12 off, and we need to get another 10.
well, or is anybody in the,
Sounds good.
is anybody, how much, 10, 13?
10.
10,
Is,
comfortable
I'm
with
happy
50,
with
yeah.
going 10 into
Reserves.
into reserves for a total of 60.
Well, I was thrilled that it was only 22 when it came up. And because we have 353,000 in reserves.
But remember,
Just
250 of that is going to a capital project that we already committed to.
This next year?
It's
this
part
year.
of this
It's the
year
Washington.
for the Washington
yeah.
Center capital
Oh.
improvements.
250.
Okay,
Can we
Okay.
scroll down a
Okay.
little bit short, or
Okay.
whoever's driving?
I forgot.
So the rest of them, we did not fund at this point.
Okay.
So the
Yeah.
bunkers, balls and birdies, and then Thurston Talk. I guess another place to highlight too, just again, kind of the rugby and the soccer requests, there is a difference there of around $9,000 too, so I just want to point that out.
And so if we did 10,000 of reserves, Troy, how would that hit us? We're at a 103, is that right? Minus the capital project.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I forgot about the capital project.
Only 10,
No,
or is that? Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely gonna use the 250 there.
We're gonna take 250 out of the 353, right?
I think we'll be close to that 353 in terms of use of reserves.
Still after doing the 250 to Washington Performing Arts.
Yeah, today we've already spent, so through August, we've already spent 723,000. is what we projected at.
Our income was decent.
Pardon?
Our interest income was decent.
Oh, yeah.
Was it like 13,000 or something?
That was closer to 20.
20?
20,228, but this model doesn't consider
It
interest.
does not.
I
What I
noticed that.
will point out at 600,000, which again is 10,000 over what we were going for with the additional $50,000, that is still a reduction from last year. So again, using less reserves, not counting the capital project that we used for last year as well.
You guys comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with this. I'm good.
You okay?
That's a crazy question.
All right, well,
Open-ended.
looks like we have some recommendations to bring forward.
Yes.
Do we need to make a motion to approve?
Yes, please.
So can I get a motion to approve this updated budget for 2024 calendar year of LTAC funding?
I'll make the motion.
A second,
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this budget?
just would like an email copy of what you ever did so I can have reference.
Absolutely.
Okay. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. We have a preliminary budget for the 2024 cycle. Looks like, okay, next item on our agenda is our 2025 meeting tentative dates. Does that mean 2025 or 2024?
2025 funding cycle, 2024 be here and present.
Okay,
Right.
so
I like to be ahead of time, but 2 years is a little excessive. So just to kind of highlight, we have discussed multiple times having a kind of end of year recap and maybe potentially meeting earlier and more times next year. So I just wanted to highlight and check in with all of you to make sure that we're prepared for that. During this meeting, we would review the year-to-date budget, see how everything went for this previous cycle, review the previous cycles, funding use and event updates, so seeing who has expended everything year to date, see how those new events went and where everything stood over the year. Also taking some time to review the 2024 application and review cycle and that application feedback, as we did pilot that online application this year and have elected to go fully online next year. With that, also taking some time to review the scoring card and rubric that we piloted this year, reviewing the categories that we use to score and the point weight to see if there is some adjustments to make. Also circling back to looking at potential funding allocations. We had presented some ideas for funding marketing, capital, and events within a certain range, so circling back to that. And then finally, adopting and implementing a policy of these, which was mentioned earlier this year, but waiting till next year when we have a lot more time to really review and take a deep dive. Is there anything else additional to this list that we want to make sure to capture in that meeting?
so there's a question, but you can go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to just say that we wanted to make sure that we had future dates with other LTAC committees. That was one thing that we wanted to add.
There was that. And then also, when it comes to implementation of policy and procedures for this body, do we also have to run those policy and procedures through the council?
So this would be adopted by this group. So it does not necessarily need to go in front of the council because it's not going to be incorporated into the city policies or procedures manual. However, it'd be good to provide some updates on kind of the general direction after this body has had a discussion.
Okay,
So that's Malcolm's responsibility
pretty much.
on your report.
And circling back to our meetings with other LTAC committees, when we say other, we mean Tumwater and Olympia.
Correct.
And, okay.
Now, Thurston, the county also has some LTAC.
Yeah, we
Not
can add
much.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would like to add them as well.
But they do.
Definitely look into those options. Any other items that we want added or highlighted in this upcoming February meeting?
Lunch?
So-
Yeah.
So pull out your calendars.
Yes, so I do have several tentative times because we found the nature of these conversations at our very first meeting were very in-depth and required a lot, I would recommend having at least 2 meetings to get through all of those materials we just mentioned. So any of these times are potentially available. If you all have the ability to check your calendar, we could get that scheduled out far ahead of time now. If not, I can have Nicole send out a doodle pool within the week and try to get that scheduled by the end of the month, just so we have it reserved on your calendars and our calendars here.
Please have her send it out.
Yeah, that's
A doodle
probably.
pool.
That's a little far.
Don't do March first because you have to give me a birthday party then.
Okay.
80th birthday party.
So
no.
80.
We'll get cupcakes, sounds like.
Perfect. Well, I will have March 1st removed. And again, I will have Nicole send this out and looking to have a response to this within the next 1 week or so, just so again, we can get that up and have plenty of time to prepare those materials.
Sounds fair.
When's Valentine's Day again?
14th.
I'm horrible with holidays, so it's too close to Valentine's Day.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our agenda. And if anybody has anything further, seeing none, I will call this LTAC meeting adjourned.